Hello, hello, hello. We don't have lots of light in here. Well, look at this. About 45 minutes to figure out how to get this up and running again. I'm not quite sure why the link to all the details and instructions to how to link the YouTube stuff to Patreon is a broken link at the moment. So the instructions I used last time didn't actually work. They weren't there. I don't know if you'll be able to hear me okay. I hope you can. I hope you can see the lovely sloth calendar in the background. I'm drying out my scarf still from yesterday. So that on the back of the chair, which actually looks much nicer than the chair itself. And I'm in my, let's show you, in my little sweater that is super warm and cozy for this, somewhat winter-like weather. Yeah. And I didn't even have time to put some eyeliner on to make myself look a little better for this. Isn't that hilarious? So it's kind of been this time, apart from anything else, because I just hadn't thought that the weather would be a big problem, because I assumed, rather stupidly, that people would be used to snow here. And so knowing that the forecast was snow, surely lots of grit would be put down and lots of things would be in place to, clear driveways and driveways, can't even speak, and roads. And it kind of wasn't. So it meant that I was able to get out of Manhattan by a train. The trains weren't that much more delayed than they normally are. This is to get back to New Jersey. But then once I was there, Ryan actually being able to get to me to pick me up took him about 2 hours or something stupid to get from where he is to Secaucus Junction, which normally takes 45 minutes. So yeah, that's how it went. So yeah, it's kind of crazy. And then today, do something really special, like go into Manhattan, hire a piano practice room for a couple of hours, and play something and see if I could live stream from there. I knew I would need to book it for a couple of hours to be able to prepare the live stream to make sure that, I'd have it all set up, because I knew it was going to take a while. And I'm glad I did take the 45 minutes today to try and figure it out, even though I think once again I've been unable to kind of send a good to get a good sort of heads up on what time I was going to do this. Just the fact that I wasn't able to go into Manhattan today just really scuppered my plans. Scuppered my plans. There's an expression that most Americans don't know. Scuppered isn't a word Americans use. So yeah, you're welcome for being taught some British English vocab. So the reason beyond the stress of last night and not getting back until midnight, half midnight, something like that, and not getting to bed till 1:30. On top of that, Ryan had a problem with the tire, and they had to replace the tire and use the spare one. And now they need to replace tires overall. And I don't know whether this is now going to mean I'm not going to be able to get into Manhattan for the next 4 or 5 days, because they have to order the new tires, and apparently they're not available till Tuesday. So if I'm stranded in the suburbs, bearing in mind this week I ended up being in the suburbs and a full 5 days before getting back into Manhattan again. I may develop that kind of tick that the guy gets in The Fly, Jeff Goldblum's character, when he starts just getting that slight tick. I think that's what happens to me when I'm in the suburbs. I start to go a little crazy, yeah. But what I can do to try and combat that, I mean, if that's going to be the case, I have to do some work to actually accept that, because every fiber of my body right now screams, no! And be calm about the idea of being stuck in the suburbs. It's not good. Bearing in mind, all the effort I go to get myself stateside in the first place. It's kind of rough. The whole point is to be in New York. not the suburbs of New Jersey. However, um, if that is the case, I need to make good use of that wonderful app that I used last week rather a lot. Well, used it once actually, but explored it as an option for rehearsing scenes. So I think they call it We Audition now rather than We Rehearse, which is what it used to be called. But it's an app that you can get on your phone. You can use it on desktop and everything as well. Um, and basically, just when an actor wants to rehearse, I think it's mostly LA-based actors. They just post something saying we're looking for someone to do a read through with me, or I want to rehearse something for my American accent practice, or I want to rehearse something, or I want to do a self tape for an audition. I need a partner to read with me for that. It's brilliant, actually. And if I could do a little bit more of that, I think that would probably give me some focus to help me not go crazy. I certainly really, really, really enjoyed it last week when I was working on stuff for uh, the scenes that I was filming for the New York University students. Um, what I did, apart from having a lesson with Gabby Santinelli, who's a good old friend of mine, but also who's a very well renowned and successful coach in LA for British actors needing to develop their American accent. Um, I had a whole lesson with her to kind of get the basics, and I had a follow up lesson to specifically go over the scene that I had. Um, and then I had this one off session with, and I think her name's Angela Malhotra, and some stuff that weren't quite right. And she also picked up on where my focus on the accent stuff was preventing me from actually getting the acting, spot on, or keeping the focus on the acting. Um, so I really enjoyed that stuff. It was really, really good. Um, so yeah, that's certainly something I can try and do a bit more of in the meantime, as an online thing. And another thing I've been thinking about, bearing in mind, I'm gonna have some coffee, leftover coffee, probably a bit cold now. Um, bearing in mind, I do have to go back to the UK in December the 11th. I've been thinking I'm going to sublet the place I had in Palmer's Green again. So another bit of toing and froing with the collecting my keyboard and taking it back, which I'm not looking forward to. But being able to use one of the girls' rooms, the one that's got a view of the garden, actually, will be actually Christmas. So I'll be there from the 12th of December to the 30th, possibly the 31st. It depends how long she's away. But she's got a gig, essentially. She's got some work that she's doing for Christmas. I think it's Panto, something like that. And so she's going to be away, and she's subletting her room to me. So I get to use that again. So I get to have my own space in London again. So I'm really, at least, looking forward to having my own space. I actually have my own space here right now, in that Ryan and his dad, who I've been staying with, um, are out going, at Costco trying to sort out getting the new tire for the car. I think they want to get a whole bunch of new tires, so if that happens again, they've got some spares. Um, so anyway, they're out doing that. I think they're on their way back now. But yeah, so I actually have the place to myself for a while, which has been lovely to actually just have that calm. And I've been really feeling the need to do a lot more. And actually, it's been really good I've done a couple of things I found really useful. One of those is, literally lighting a nice candle and using the Timer app. I think it's just called Timer. It's a little app that gives you a insight timer, is what it's called. I don't think I'll be able to show you the symbol, but it gives you one of those little. It's a symbol of like one of those bowls, Tibetan bowls. They use to kind of make a really lovely ringing sound. And when you set the timer for a meditation, then you can choose from some of those sounds. And I try and do a meditation for like 11 minutes. That's what I'm up to at the moment. But I have been going to a couple of meeting things, like it's that sort of sound. Don't know if you can hear that, but that's what the app looks like. But that's an indication. challenges. That sound just takes so long to die. Um, so yeah, so anyway, that's what I use for meditating. So it just gives me that flat time. I don't have haven't used it with any sort of background music, but you can add that. Or you can add sort of background sounds like the sound of rain or the sound of a bubbling brook, stream, that sort of thing. And it's great for that. It's just really easy to use. So I've been doing that. And I've also been going, as I say, to this sort of meditation meeting where they have a 20-minute meditation. And actually, I find that really helpful because 20 minutes seems like such a long time when you first try it. And you just think, oh, good God, it can't be, there can't be any time left still, you know. And I suppose probably at the halfway point, you sort of think, oh, goodness, it's been a long time. Surely it's running out of time now. And then you realize, no, it's carrying on. You better just get back into focusing on your breathing or something, you know. The challenge always is to clear your mind all of the to-do list. Sometimes I'm better at than others. So, but yeah, you know, do let me know the sorts of things you would like me to talk about if I'm doing live streams and I find I can't get to a piano practice room or I can't get to my keyboard or I don't happen to have my keyboard with me at the time and I can't do something music related. What would you like me to do? What would you rather I do? Are there questions you would like to pose to me? Are there requests you would like for me to work on for when I can get to a piano practice room? I mean, certainly if I can hire a piano practice room for a couple of hours next week, maybe before Thanksgiving, if I can get into Manhattan, then I can try and record something for you, at least a live video recording of it. I could try and do that. So it depends what you'd like. And yeah. Anything else really? I guess that we just get an idea of what you want from these live streams, if they're useful. Obviously, until I have a really set time and we have established, you know, a way of making this nice and quick and easy for me to jump on, it does make it hard for everyone to be involved. It makes it hard for me to get on there. You know, I have to prepare for like an hour to try and get this up and running. It makes it hard for me to say in advance when I'm going to do it. Obviously, for those of you on UK time, it's pretty late in the day. And those of you that might be in the States and have work that you have to do for, I'm not sure that there's anyone doing 9-to-5 jobs, but even if you were, or even if you're not, 5 o'clock in the afternoon may not be the ideal time for you. You might be just about to have some dinner, I don't know. So, you know, let me know. Talk to me. Tell me what's up. Anyway, a couple of updates on some other stuff. Apart from all the sort of spiritual, trying to do meditation and things, sort of reading, well, starting to do a lot of reading. I've got a lot of books that I've been dipping in and out of and trying to make sure I actually get through them. And there are a bunch of different things that I'm doing. I'm reading some biographies. I've been reading the Jane Fonda book, My Life So Far, which actually is even more fascinating than I thought. Just some amazing things came up in here. And I wrote an email this week to all of my email subscribers. They were sort of based on something I read from here, where she was talking about the camp that she used to run, where she met someone who she basically sort of adopted as her daughter. And she found that, you know, there are people who go to those camps and don't really feel like they have any hope for the future, purely because their families are so poor that you know, trying to get by day to day. So it was really interesting to hear of Jane Fonda's own perception of that, of how she wants to prevent that sense of hopelessness among kids growing up in poor families, I guess. And I guess the word poor is also used in that way that makes it seem like, oh, poor thing. Less than wealthy families, working class families even, and certainly in this day and age, working class means breadline. You know, if you're working class, just not earning enough to pay the rent and pay for food, certainly not healthy food. And God forbid that you actually want to travel somewhere on top of that. It's tough. So I found it really inspiring reading the chapter I did from Jane Fonda's book. I've also been reading a number of different things. There's a book about writing and the style of writing that I've just started to dip into, which is really interesting and kind of highlights a lot of things that I've done wrong in my own writing. I was sort of like, yes, need to work on. I read, and I think I mentioned this in my email newsletter email thing. I also read some more in the Nora Ephron book. I Feel Bad About My Neck is the title of the book. And I read the chapter called Moving On, which, oh my God, it genuinely brought me to tears. I was reading it and just, apart from anything else, it's from a different era. It's from the 80s to mid 90s at the latest. It's from a time when, Rosie O'Donnell was living in the same building as her. She managed to find this apartment that was an incredible apartment in a building that's right next to the subway. I guess it's become a really famous building now, but it's got a courtyard and a doorman, and it's beautiful. It's on the Upper West Side, and she had an apartment that had something like 5 bedrooms. For $1,500 a month, which just seems absolutely preposterous now. Because now you're lucky to get a room in that area for that amount of money. But yeah, however, she had to pay $24,000 up front as key money, I think they call it, as some sort of permission to move in, which was ridiculous. I mean, so expensive at the time. And would still be ridiculously expensive now for something you're renting. It wasn't to buy, it was to rent. But nonetheless, she was able to do that, and she, was in love with this building. So yeah, she went ahead and got this apartment and loved it until they lost the rent stabilization, rent control rules and regulations about that changed, and suddenly she was faced with her rent doubling, tripling. And gradually it just kept going up and up and up. And there was a point where it finally had just gone to such astronomical prices that she said, you know what? And just with that, I fell out of love with the building. I fell out of love with the apartment. And she moved to the Upper West Side, which strikes me as kind of ironic because more desirable than the Upper West Side. I don't know why that is. That's probably just my perception. Who knows? But yeah, so that was fascinating. That my reaction to reading about that and her joy of being in this wonderful apartment was just that I had tears streaming down my eyes, and that just goes to show how much I long to live in an apartment on my own. And as such, I've been thinking about, well, is there any way, bearing in mind I have to go back to England one more time at least, before doing anything serious visa-wise with regard to trying to stay here, is there any way I can rent somewhere, even if I rent somewhere in the middle of nowhere, like Liverpool, somewhere that might have a music-based community, but that isn't London? Would I be able to afford it if my budget is £600 a month all in, which is kind of half of my maximum income, and that's pushing it. It's tough when you're paying half your income and it's not the most sensible. But studio apartment where I could actually live on my own. Oh, would that be worth living in the middle of nowhere? Would that be worth living somewhere where I don't have friends and community? Because even when I do, it still costs the extra money, and I have to weigh up whether I can afford to go into town to get to events and do things. So I don't know. I'm just weighing it all up in my head, trying to figure it out. But that's the other issue, how much do we need to figure things out ourselves, and how much do we need to just set the intention of what we want and just leave the universe to kind of fill in the gaps? I know it sounds terribly woo-woo, but it's something that I'm really questioning and really it's on my mind a lot at the moment. Anyway, with regard to coincidences, the final thing I wanted to talk about is I met a woman purely by chance yesterday who gave me her card. As you can see, it's Sesame Street related. because of everyone being got to Secaucus, the trains weren't that bad. But once I was at Secaucus Junction, you could see that loads of people do exactly the same as I do, get back to Secaucus and then get a lift from Secaucus to wherever they actually live. In our case, it's a 45-minute drive thereafter, and it was much longer last night. So Secaucus Junction was just filled with people sitting on the floor, sitting on benches, sitting by the pizza place was suddenly doing great business. And there was this girl who was sitting just on the floor against a pillar, and I was just standing leaning against an opposite pillar. And I noticed this bag, and it was just a beautiful colored bag. Like I mean, when I say beautiful, it was like it was very cutesy in a way. It was like it was very, bold colors. It was a bright pinks and bright yellows and bright blues, and but it was a great pattern, and it was just kind of cool. And I just thought, wow, that looks fun. What is that? And then the more I looked at it, the more I realized just that it was little sections of it was almost like a tiny oblong on top of another oblong on top of a square, and the tiny oblong had eyes, and it looked like Cookie Monster's eyes. And then underneath there was another oblong that might have been a section of a monster of some other kind, and then underneath there was a section where it clearly looked like Oscar the Grouch, in eyes peeking out of his trash can. Um, and I just looked at it and went, "This has to be a Sesame Street related thing." And I love that bag. And where did she get it? So I plucked up the courage to speak to this woman and just said, "Oh, I love your bag. Where did you get that?" And she said, I said, "It looks like it's a Sesame Street thing. Is that right?" And she said, "Yeah, yeah, it is. I got it because it was the 50th anniversary of Sesame Street. I actually work for them." And so we got talking about what she does. And apparently she goes around the States doing various initiatives that are supported by programming and bits and pieces related to the website that are related to Sesame Street. For example, they have a writers, I don't know what you would call it. Like, I guess it's a kind of class for a group of writers that get an opportunity to have some mentorship and lessons, in a sense, around writing, and it's for underrepresented racial groups, essentially. So you apply, and then they assess, and they choose, I don't know, 8 people or whatever it is, and they all come to free tuition then in New York City for, I don't know, however long it is, um, a few months or something. And that sounds like a great thing. They also go into schools and do literacy based things for kids in schools, particularly for kids in underrepresented groups in terms of either racial background or possibly sort of religious background that people are discriminating against these days, um, or just generally sort of just not having lots of money to go to extracurricular events and things. Because I'm sure, I mean, I know that in the UK, when you're a working class kid, you can't go to the extracurricular stuff because they charge for it, or you can't have a private tutor for something because nobody can afford it. Um, so to have something that would be related to Sesame Street that gives you extra lessons for free, or extra tuition on something, or mentorship about something for free is just amazing. And I just really admire the idea of it. I've always loved the ethos of Sesame Street. I've always felt that that is something that clearly wants to include people from all walks of life, whether you're rich, poor, black, white, whatever background racially or religious wise you are, or sexual orientation, and all of those things that people discriminate against. I think it's just great that Sesame Street has always sought to include everyone, no matter what. Um, I've always felt that something brings people together. I mean, just look how I ended up talking to that woman just because she had that bag. And the more I knew that she, once I found out that she worked for Sesame Street, then I was like, oh my God, I love Sesame Street. It just brought us together. So for something that's a force for good that brings people together to have conversations just automatically is an incredible strength and power really in the world. And it's those sorts of companies, those sorts of forces that we need more of. We need to have those sorts of things in place that automatically bring people together, that automatically include everyone and don't discriminate against anyone. Um, I think we also need to have specific initiatives where companies are working with schools and people in the community as well. I mean, gosh, if I actually had a permanent address, I could start to get involved with something like that in theory, and I love to do that. I'd love to get involved in some sort of. One of the things I mentioned to this woman, in fact, Jasmine was her name, Jasmine Williams. One of the things I mentioned to her was, I really advocate talking about women in science or women in aviation or those sort of fields that traditionally women are excluded from or not seen as being represented by. And I noticed that Sesame Street does have something related to space travel, but it's got Elmo in the spacesuit. And they really do need to have more female characters in Sesame Street anyway. There's a lot of male characters amongst the puppets. And I think some of the female characters they've had have been less well represented in the first place. Um, and I think, it really would be great if they had, if they had a female character that was basically always going into space. That would be fantastic. Can you imagine? Um, and I mentioned my song about Valentina Tereshkova. Um, and all of that stuff, I just think we really need more representation. Obvious point. Of course, women can go into space. Of course, women can fly planes or helicopters for that matter. Um, but where are we seeing that represented? We're not seeing that represented in the Hollywood films, even. How many times do you get some sort of action film and there's actually a woman at the helm of a helicopter or a little, Cessna plane? It just doesn't happen. And it's just very, very rare. And I think it's about time that we had a lot more representation of that kind of thing. Because it's something that you'd think by now would be a done deal. Obviously, anyone could do this. I don't know. It's just not been, there hasn't been enough of that. So, anyway, she did also say that she hands out a few freebies and things when she's normally going on these things, and if I wanted a couple for my niece and nephew, then I could email her and she would send something across. So I have emailed her and followed up and said also about how I would love to get involved with this, some way of doing, try and make the most of this traveling. At the moment, I have been focusing a little bit too much on the frustration of not having my own place to live and the frustration of not having all my things in one place. But I've got to remind myself that the frustration I feel at the problem of not having all of my things in one place is a problem I share with Catherine Zeta-Jones. So Catherine Zeta-Jones and I are, like that. We're just on a par. Our lives are just so, so similar, as you can imagine. So yeah, the difficulty of having so many properties dotted around the globe and not remembering where you've got your things, which one has your favorite jacket, and all that sort of thing. It's tough, so I do sympathize enormously with Catherine. Yeah, it's a tough time, but yeah, I've been focusing on all of that stuff far too much instead of thinking, how fantastic is it that I've just been able spent the last couple of years going back and forth between Paris and New York. And, I've got to travel and meet a lot of different people and do a lot of different things. And getting to be that kind of international, international feminist artist person, it's pretty cool, really. If I do say so myself. It is pretty cool. And I'm really lucky that I get to do it. So, I'm really grateful that I am getting to be so sort of almost versed in different cultures. I get the opportunity to talk to people who are from different backgrounds, who are in different places, so they have a different outlook on life. Um, and yeah, it's just really interesting. I'm meeting people who are much older than me, people who are younger than me, and their outlook can be different as well. Plus, across different countries, the UK compared to the US, there are lots of differences culturally that we often sort of think aren't really there. But as much as it's up to think about their future, And certainly that's something I mentioned in my newsletter. And I suppose finally one of the things I wanted to talk to you guys about, because you are the top tier, top people, um, is I'm so grateful for your support, because it's really isolating doing this stuff. And it's so for the whole being an artist, whatever you want to call it, being a musician, being an artist, being someone who tries to do creative things, fuck, it's hard. It really, sometimes it's really bloody hard. And one of the hard things about it is, the pity you get from other people, um, for, not having a family, not doing the traditional things, not having a permanent place to live, you know, um, and sometimes jealousy, sometimes that's just a veil for wishing to God they had the kind of freedom I did. So, yeah, there are a lot of people that might be quite resentful, which is kind of funny. Um, but yeah, it can be hard from that point of view of feeling like I've got nothing in common with the people that I'm trying to interact with, because they're all people who aspire to, picket fence and kids and two cars and big house, all of that stuff. And that's just the complete opposite of what I want for my life. And that can be isolating in itself. And there are things that you think as an artist when you've written a song about it, or you've, meditated about it, or you've been to therapy about it, or you've talked to, friends about it, whatever. You think you've dealt with it and you think you've kind of cleared that and you can move on. And then I found myself getting really upset again about something that happened when I was 17 that I wrote about in my newsletter. And I probably shouldn't have written about it in my newsletter. And maybe it was a step too far in being too clear about my own personal issues. But the whole story about my mum, thinking immediately about how none of this stuff is going to pay the rent, how it has still come up in recent years as well. I've been staying with them, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, just read the email. But more recently, like there's like a 25-year gap between these two instances. More recently, that when I was staying with my parents for a bit, I don't know, I think it was a builder or some guy that was doing some work in the house, saw me coming down the stairs as he was about to leave, and he asked who I was or whatever. And my mum introduced me, and he said, "Oh, what does she do?" And so mum was sort of speaking for me because I was still making my way down the stairs or something. I don't know. I can't remember exactly how this worked out, but she said, "Oh yeah, she's incredibly talented. She does all of these, she does music and acting and all that sort of thing." And he's like, "Oh really? Wow. She earn a living from that?" And she's like, and instead of my mum saying not quite yet, no, or no, or well, nearly, or something like that, she just said, "No." That's the thing. It's just one of those things that's never sort of secure income, is it? And it was almost like she was talking to him as a way of saying, "So, this is the deal. I'm having to tell these people," and so it was almost like the pity came out in having a little pity party with the guy on my behalf, about how no, I don't get consistent income from this, and this is why I'm having to stay at home with my parents for a bit. As though directed immediately to shame me and make me feel like crap. Um, and I had to point out, well, I haven't. Yeah, I have earned money from this stuff. I've earned money from my music. I've earned money from my acting, particularly acting. I've earned money from and paid rent for a couple of months out of the last acting job I had. Um, so it's just one of those things where, because it's not consistent, because I can't say, yes, I definitely earn this amount every month and therefore I'm able to buy a house, it's almost as though it doesn't count, you know. And it's all too easy to, I can't guarantee it, I can't rely on it. And it's very infantilizing. It's sort of very easy to feel like, oh, good God, this is like I'm 5 years old again. And just when you think you've risen above it, and you're doing well and everything's okay, there's, a day when you're tired and you're feeling a bit fed up and frustrated and impatient, and it comes back with a vengeance, and you think, damn it, I'm still not over it. Still not. feeling good about all that stuff. Um, and I don't know what the right way to deal with that is. You know, you can read business books that say don't write about anything that was tough in your life until you've actually dealt with it. Once you've moved on and you're in a higher position where that's never going to happen again, that's when you can talk about it. But until you've actually overcome it and that's never, you know, that's not a risk of happening again, then you shouldn't discuss it. And you just think, well, really? Is that how it works? Because that's not how you talk to friends. You know, if your friends and someone, you say, look, you know, it's not change for good or not. I don't know if it's ever going to change. I don't know if it's ever going to be fine or if it's going to continue to be a problem. I just don't know. Um, so yeah, you know, it's funny these sorts of things, trying to navigate them. Anyway, I'm very aware that I've been talking for, YouTube tells me 36 minutes and 44 seconds. This is quite a long time. So I figured nobody would be able to get on live today, and I may have interrupted things or confused things with some of the setup of trying to get on YouTube anyway. So if you did try and get in on this and you're now watching the replay saying, I was trying, then I'm really, really sorry. I'm doing my best to kind of figure this out, but it's yeah, a bit complicated sometimes. You just think, why do they have to make it so complicated? And that's the thing. That's the thing that places like things like Facebook really kind of benefit from in quite a negative way, you know, in lives. And I did that in the past, but I really am not happy with Facebook. I would really like to extricate myself from Facebook. I'm not brilliantly happy with Google either, so YouTube isn't a fantastic alternative, but at least via Patreon, that I really do feel is a good, you know, is a force for good in the world. So, you know, it's a tough one trying to come up with things that are right on, you know, that are ethical, that are good. I certainly have changed my search engine to Ecosia or whatever it's called. It's not Google that I use anymore, which I feel much happier about. That's good. I probably need to look into changing my bank account again, although I'm no longer with one of the worst ones. I'm with one of the better ones. But, you know, things like that where you just want to try and fill your life with associations with companies that are ethical, that make sense, that are good and wholesome, you know. It's not easy. I'm trying to do my bit, you know. So in Patreon, you know, on the page, let me know some of the stuff you would like me to do for these live streams. Hopefully, if I do, let's say when I do get to live on my own in a wonderful little apartment on my own that will be perfect size for me, um, then I can start to do something, you know, music based or more creative, and that'd be great. Once I also have the consistency of living in one place for, oh gosh, 6 months, something like that, then I can be more consistent with these things as well, which would be amazing, and I would absolutely love to do that. So that would be great. Um, so the last thing I wanted to do before I completely bore you to death, is read one of the new poems, because there are a bunch of whole new poems, and I'm actually putting together. This is the exciting thing. I will tell you and no one else. But one of the exciting things I'm doing is that I'm going to be setting up a new email opt-in sort of thing. So basically, for some new opt-in things, you know, where you go in and it says put your email here, and you know you'll get some cool stuff. That's an opt-in. And I'm getting some help from this very, very helpful person called Christina. She's lovely. To put that together, to have something quite cool instead. So what I'm actually going to do is have a quiz, and it's going to be about a poem personality. So in a sense, it's basically put your email here and find out your poem personality. So it's about 5 questions, just to sort of say which is more you, and it's things like you know, trench coat, pearls, leg warmers, or a suit or something like that. Which is more you, spring, summer, autumn, winter? Which is more you, New York, Paris, London, anywhere else, that sort of thing. And out of that, you get that should be of interest to you based on the personality we've just established. So I'm going to have that all as a little form that's going to be like a little quiz you can fill in, do a little quiz. Instead of a Cosmo quiz, it's going to be a Rowan quiz. Yeah, and then you get to have a free poem as a result. It's really exciting. So I've been looking through my latest sort of poems, things I've done recently, and have a folder here that are sort of really poetry, sort of poems that kind of are too late for the second book and don't quite fit the theme of the second book yet, which is I'm still trying to find the money to put that together. But I also, I just had a handful of recent poems that just didn't completely fit anywhere else. So I've been looking through these poems. I'm wondering if I can still keep this window open and look at the poems on my computer. I've been looking through these poems and trying to decide what might fit. I want to do something new, but some of the old ones might work instead. So something I'm working on is trying to come up with those definitive poems as freebies to give away. But I think I've started to get kind of a really bit of a different style emerging in some of these poems. And one of them I read on the podcast that was with Long Thoughts with Baloo. And I'm just sort of looking at one or two now that maybe I could read for you and see what you think. Some of them are new ideas that I haven't entirely finished, and some of them are completed poems in their own right. Maybe, Conspicuous. I'll read you a poem called Conspicuous. See what you think. Your valiant attempts to impress border on insanity, your need to be noticed among those of you who do not resemble you. The pinnacle of your ambition is to be the most conspicuous and nothing more. The result of decades of self-neglect, and yet you believe you're on the cusp of intimacy, of the push-pull of a relationship with me, but you're so far from the ground and closer to the hazy mist of vague desires and half-hearted wish lists than tenacious persistence. I won't miss this as the sun goes down on our contact and the night engulfs your presence, and the light is dwindling, and the last flicker of the kindling of potential between us is transported on the gentle breeze that builds as we run out of things to say in this long forgotten city, where you'll scatter the debris you've accumulated as you descend your self-made pedestal and crush the dreams you once had beneath your feet, beyond your reach, to settle with the dust that the haze becomes in the nighttime deep freeze. Now that was a poem actually inspired by a picture. It was for a competition. And I have entered one or two competitions here and there for poetry. I also took a lot of time this year applying for funding that didn't result in anything either. But yeah, this poem was just from a picture of, it was kind of in silhouette almost. It was someone standing on this tiny piece of rock, almost like a kind of, like a pedestal, almost like just one thin column that this person was standing on, but it was clearly rock because it was uneven. And there was sort of a hazy cloud around him. And I just thought, well, what if I interpret it? The goal was to interpret the picture in a poem. And I thought, well, what if I, try and still make it one of my relationship related poems, but still incorporate those aspects of the picture as part of the meaning behind the situation. So that's what I wrote. So yeah, I need to look out some more competitions to apply for, but I particularly like those where it's sort of a challenge to do something on the spot with a brand new little piece of inspiration. I quite like those. Those are quite similar to having the writing prompts that we had at the write-in, the Gotham Writers write-in, which I really wanted to go to tonight as well, but haven't been able to get into Manhattan today because, yeah, need to replace tires on the car. So anyway, before I get wound up, at least, there are certain things I'm getting to do that are creative nonetheless. And I'm sure that this time of being forced to kind of look at what I'm doing and what I want to achieve next, and I'm sure that some good will come out of this, even though I feel like it's excruciating right now to be stuck in the suburbs. It's obviously for a reason, and I have to be a bit better at accepting that and making good use of it, and moving on ASAP. So yeah. So write your comments, tell me stuff that you want to see, things you'd like me to do, all that kind of thing. Tell me how you're doing, what's happening with you. Um, how do you feel about your year so far? Bearing in mind we're coming to the end of it. How have your goal setting things been going? I'm certainly very conscious of that at the moment, the things I've set as goals and how close I'm getting to them or not. Um, so yeah, and if you've had any chance encounters with some lovely people, um, tell me about those, because it would be good to hear about that sort of stuff. All right, this has been a really long monologue of mine. So yeah, so I'm going to leave it at that. And thanks for watching. If you watch some of the replay, thank you very much for taking the time to watch. All right, speak soon. Bye.